As the war rages on in Ukraine, India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is now heading to Russia for a bilateral visit. And he'll be holding talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov and also the Russian Trade Minister Denis Manturov on Tuesday. The meeting comes just days before the G20 summit in Bali, where Vladimir Putin will be in the same room with the Western leaders, including President Joe Biden for the first time since the war broke out. But there's another reason that Jaishankar's trip is now being regarded as an extremely crucial one. Now, what is interesting is that India is now being billed as a potential negotiator between Russia and Ukraine. Now, S. Jaishankar's visit is expected to finalize cooperation between India and Russia under multilateral frameworks, including in G20, the SCO and BRICS. But all eyes are on the possibility of the United States accepting India as a possible mediator between the two sides in the war. The reports say that India has intervened between Ukraine and Russia quietly whenever there's been a deadlock. In the month of July, India had weighed in with Russia on the grain shipment from ports in the Black Sea. Now, much of these messages have been delivered confidentially, as New Delhi is known to have positioned itself with its credibility on both sides. Meanwhile, reports have said that the Indian Prime Minister has offered assistance in peace talks during a phone call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky, however, has said that Ukraine would not conduct any negotiations with Putin, but is committed to a peaceful settlement through dialogue. But as the winter approaches in the conflict zone, there is a sense that both sides would want a ceasefire before early next year. And many view this as a potential opportunity for India to broker some kind of peace between the two sides. Now, India, remember, has been one of the biggest purchasers of Russian defense supplies. This happens to be a key pillar of the relationship between Moscow and New Delhi. But for the first time in the last 3 winters, Russian military supply lines are under strain due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. And this also has come at a time when Indian and the Chinese troops are locked in a border standoff in eastern Ladakh. And another important element to consider is the energy relationship. Russia has reportedly become India's largest supplier of crude oil in the month of October, as refiners have stepped up their purchase of discounted seaborne oil. And this, of course, has not gone down well with Ukraine as well as with Western partners. Now, S. Jaishankar's visit is, of course, expected to look at all these aspects. Now, what's also significant is that the Indian Prime Minister is expected to visit Russia this year, and if that were to happen next month, then S. Jaishankar will, of course, be there to lay the groundwork. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of why this meeting between the Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is so crucial, we're being joined in by WION's principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibil, who's joining us live from New Delhi. Siddhant, this is an interesting turn of events. For all these many months, many nations in the West had been criticizing New Delhi for purchasing oil from Russia. They had said that India was sitting on the fence and had not taken any sides, but India had insisted that it was following its policy of strategic autonomy. And now, what is interesting is that New Delhi is being looked at as a possible negotiator between Moscow and Ukraine in this war.
Well, the visit of the Indian External Affairs Minister will be closely watched, and before that we have seen Western newspapers trying to say that India can play a role in terms of mediation. But while the Western newspapers have woken up to this thing just recently, or perhaps in the last 48 hours, we know that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had spoken to both the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Ukrainian President Zelensky several times, and clearly told them that dialogue and diplomacy is the only way forward. And India, if the support or help of India is required, India is more than willing. We know that earlier when the entire invasion started in the month of February and March, India had made sure that both sides are able to be on the same page when it comes to evacuation of the Indian students from Sumy. The Sumy evacuation was perhaps one of the most precarious aspects of the evacuation of over 20,000 Indian nationals which were evacuated from the country by the neighboring countries. So largely the Indian role is something that might be underplayed so far, but suddenly it looks like the West has woken up. But largely it will be the visit. We are due to shortly get the first pictures of Indian External Affairs Minister in Moscow. He will be holding his talks with his counterpart, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and there will be a joint presser as well between two foreign ministers tomorrow, which will be around lunchtime, Indian Standard Time. And that press statement or question answer session is something that keenly will be awaited by everyone in the regional and global capitals. In fact, we know that the Indian External Minister's visit is the third visit from the Indian side, an Indian minister to Moscow since the invasion started. We know that the Health Minister of India and the Indian NSA both had visited Moscow earlier this year.
Absolutely indeed, Siddhant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us all those important updates. This is a visit by the Indian Foreign Minister, which will of course continue to track very closely on WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.